The alarm screamed through the ship like a wounded animal. Danny Cole dropped his coffee cup and ran toward the bridge, his boots pounding against the metal floor. He had been a rescue pilot for 7 years, and he knew that sound meant someone out there was dying. Captain Greg Santos stood at the command center, his face tight with worry. The holographic display showed a debris field spreading across the Valon Nebula like scattered bones. "We picked up a distress signal," the captain said. "Looks like a transport ship." Something tore it apart. Danny studied the wreckage. Pieces of metal spun slowly through the void, catching the light of distant stars. Whatever had destroyed that ship had done it quickly and without mercy. "Any life signs?" Danny asked. "One, faint, coming from what looks like an escape pod buried in the debris." Danny was already moving toward the door. "I'm going." "Hold on," Santos called after him. "That debris field is a death trap. We should send a drone first to map a safe path. By the time a drone gets back, whoever's in that pod will be dead." Danny didn't slow down. "I've flown through worse." He hadn't flown through worse. Not even close. But he said it anyway because there was someone out there who needed help. And Danny Cole had never been able to walk away from someone who needed help. The shuttle bay was cold and quiet. Danny climbed into his small rescue craft and ran through the startup sequence with practiced hands. The engines hummed to life, and he guided the shuttle out into the black emptiness of space. The debris field was even more dangerous up close. Massive chunks of twisted metal tumbled through the void, spinning in unpredictable patterns. Smaller pieces shot past like bullets. One wrong move and his shuttle would be torn apart. Danny's hands moved smoothly over the controls. He dipped under a spinning engine core, rolled around a section of hull plating, and threaded through a gap that gave him less than 2 meters of clearance on either side. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hands stayed steady. The life pod appeared on his scanner. It was small, barely large enough for one person, and it was damaged. Power readings showed it was running on emergency reserves. Whoever was inside had maybe an hour left, probably less. Danny brought his shuttle alongside the pod and locked on with the magnetic grapples. Through the small window of the pod, he could see a figure slumped against the inner wall. The figure had pale lavender skin and long silver hair that floated in the zero-gravity Therian. Danny had never seen one in person before. Humanity had made first contact with the Therian Empire 5 years ago, but relations between the two species remained tense and formal. The Therians were ancient and powerful, and they looked at humans the way adults looked at children playing with dangerous toys. Danny pulled the pod into his shuttle's cargo bay and rushed to open it. The Therian inside was female, and she was badly hurt. Blood the color of dark wine stained her torn clothing. Her breathing was shallow and weak, but even injured and unconscious, she was the most beautiful being Danny had ever seen. Her features were delicate and sharp at the same time, like a sculpture carved from moonlight. And on her clothing, half hidden by blood and dirt, he could see an elaborate symbol that made his heart skip. The royal crest of the Therian Imperial House. He had just rescued a princess. Danny pushed that thought aside and focused on keeping her alive. He applied pressure to her worst wounds, injected her with the broad-spectrum medical compounds from his emergency kit, and prayed that Therian biology was similar enough to human biology that the medicine would help rather than hurt. The journey back to the Starwarg Hope took 16 hours. Danny stayed beside her the entire time, monitoring her vital signs, talking to her even though she couldn't hear him. He told her about Earth, about his childhood in a small town where the sky was clear enough to see 1,000 stars. He told her about his mother, who had died when he was 12, and how looking up at the stars always made him feel close to her again. He didn't know why he told her these things. She was unconscious and alien and royal, and he was just a pilot from nowhere important. But something about her made him want to talk, to fill the silence with human warmth. When they finally reached the ship, the medical team was waiting. Dr. Lisa Perry took one look at the Thyrian princess and started issuing orders. They rushed her to the medical bay, and Danny followed. Refusing to leave even when they told him to get some rest, he sat in the corner of the medical bay for 6 hours while Lisa and her team worked to save the princess's life. He watched them close her wounds, stabilize her internal injuries, and slowly bring her back from the edge of death. When her eyes finally opened, Danny was still there. The princess looked around the medical bay with confusion and fear. Her silver eyes moved across the unfamiliar human faces until they landed on Danny. She stared at him for a long moment, and something in her expression changed. "You," she said. Her voice was weak but clear, and she spoke English with a musical accent. "You are the one who pulled me from the wreckage." Danny stood up, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands. "Yes, ma'am. Your Highness, Princess." He cleared his throat. "I'm Lieutenant Danny Cole. Welcome aboard the Starboard Hope." The princess continued to stare at him in a way that made Danny uncomfortable. It felt like she was looking through him rather than at him, seeing something beneath his skin that he couldn't see himself. "My name is Alindra Voshkith," she said, "third daughter of Emperor Thalos VII. She paused, and her voice dropped to something like wonder. "You came for me alone. Through all that death and destruction. You risked everything for a stranger." Danny shrugged, embarrassed by the intensity of her gaze. "It's my job. Search and rescue. That's what I do." "No," Alindra said softly. "I have seen many people in my life, Lieutenant Cole. I have a gift that allows me to see the energy that lives within all things. And yours." She reached out one pale hand toward him, then let it fall back to the bed. "Yours burns brighter than any I've ever seen." Danny didn't know what to say to that. He had always thought of himself as ordinary. Just a guy who flew shuttles and followed orders and tried to do the right thing when he could. But the way this alien princess looked at him made him feel like maybe he was something more. "By the ancient laws of my people," Alindra continued, her voice growing stronger, "you have saved my life. I am now bound to you by a debt that cannot be measured in gold or favors. A life debt." "That's really not necessary," Danny started to say. But Alindra's eyes had already closed, exhaustion pulling her back into sleep. And Danny was left standing there, wondering what he had gotten himself into. The Thyrian diplomatic ship arrived 3 days later. It was massive and beautiful, covered in sweeping curves and glowing lights that made the Starboard Hope look like a rusty bucket in comparison. The Thyrians had been building starships for thousands of years before humans had even invented the wheel. Captain Santa stood in the docking bay, dressed in his finest uniform, sweating nervously. Beside him stood Danny, Lisa, and a dozen other crew members, all trying their best to look professional and respectable. The airlock opened, and the Thyrian delegation stepped through. They were tall and graceful, with the same pale lavender skin and silver hair as Alindra. Their leader was an older male with hard eyes and a permanent frown. He introduced himself as High Counselor Ven, Special Envoy of the Emperor. "We have come to retrieve Princess Alindra," Ven said. His voice was cold and formal. "The Emperor thanks you for your assistance. You will be compensated appropriately." "We were happy to help," Captain Santos replied. "The princess has recovered well. She's waiting in the medical bay." They walked through the ship together, and Danny noticed how the Thyrians looked at everything with barely hidden disgust. The Starboard Hope was old and worn, patched together from decades of service. To these ancient aliens, it probably looked like a cave dwelling. Alindra was standing when they entered the medical bay. She had been given clean clothes from the ship's stores, and though they didn't quite fit her alien frame, she still looked regal and composed. Her eyes found Danny's immediately, and she gave him a small nod. "Princess," Ven said, bowing deeply, "your father has been greatly worried. We must return to Thyra immediately." "I am grateful for my father's concern," Alendra replied, "but I will not be returning with you." The silence that followed was absolute. Danny saw the shock ripple through the Thyrian delegation like a wave. Even Captain Santis looked startled. Ven recovered first, though his face had gone pale. "I do not understand, Your Highness. The transport is waiting." "I understand perfectly well where the transport is." Alindra's voice was calm but firm. "I have invoked the right of shadowing. Until my life debt to Lieutenant Cole is satisfied, I will remain at his side." Now it was Danny's turn to feel shocked. "Wait, what?" Ven was shaking his head. "Princess, this is highly irregular. The right of shadowing is an ancient tradition, rarely invoked even among our own people. To use it for a human, the ancient laws make no distinction between species," Alendra said. "Lieutenant Cole saved my life at great risk to his own. The debt exists. I will honor it. The Emperor will not allow this. The Emperor cannot override the old laws, and he knows it." Alendra's eyes were steady. "Return to my father and explain the situation. I will be safe here." The argument continued for another hour, but Alendra would not change her mind. Eventually, Ven and his delegation departed, promising to return with the Emperor's response. Danny watched their ship disappear into hyperspace and wondered what kind of storm was coming. The next few weeks were strange and uncomfortable. Alendra was given quarters next to Danny's, and she took her new role as his shadow very seriously. She followed him to breakfast. She followed him to his shifts. She followed him to the recreation room where he played cards with his friends. Danny tried to avoid her at first. He took extra duties. He ate in his room. He pretended to be asleep when she knocked on his door. But Alendra was patient. She waited outside his door for hours. She learned his schedule and appeared wherever he went. "This is crazy," Danny said to her one morning, finding her sitting outside his quarters like she did every day. "You're a princess. I'm nobody. You can't just follow me around like this." "I am exactly where I am supposed to be," Alendra replied simply. "But why? Your debt thing. I don't understand it. I didn't save you to get anything. I don't want anything from you." Alendra tilted her head, stunning him with those silver eyes. "That is precisely why the debt exists, Lieutenant Cole. You wanted nothing. You expected nothing. You simply saw someone in need and you helped. Among my people, such purity of action is rare and precious." Danny didn't know how to respond to that. He had never thought of himself as pure or precious. He had just done what any decent person would do. As the days passed, Alendra began to integrate herself into the ship's life. She asked endless questions about human customs and technology. She tried human food, declaring coffee to be the greatest discovery since faster-than-light travel. She watched human entertainment, becoming strangely obsessed with cooking shows and old comedy films. The crew, suspicious at first, began to warm to her. She was curious and kind, and she treated even the lowest enlisted sailor with respect and interest. She helped in the medical bay, her knowledge of Thyrian healing techniques proving useful in unexpected ways. She sat with lonely crew members and listened to their stories about home. And slowly, Danny stopped avoiding her. He found himself looking forward to their conversations. Alendra was intelligent and funny in a strange alien way. She saw the universe differently than any human he had ever met, and talking to her felt like seeing everything with new eyes. One night, they sat together in the observation deck, watching the stars drift past. "Your people," Alendra said softly, "you live such short lives. A century, if you're lucky. My grandmother is 900 years old, and still considered middle-aged. That must be strange, Danny said. Living that long. It is not strange to us. It is simply how things are. She paused. What is strange is watching you humans. You have so little time, yet you burn so brightly. You take risks that make no sense. You love with your whole hearts, knowing that death waits just around the corner. She turned to look at him. When you flew into that debris field to save me, you should have died 100 times. But you did not hesitate. You did not calculate the odds. You simply went. Danny shrugged. Someone needed help. Yes, Alindra said. Someone needed help. And that was enough for you. She was quiet for a moment. I think that is why humans frighten us. Not because you are dangerous, though you are, but because you remind us of what we have lost. We Thyrians have lived so long that we have forgotten how to burn. Danny didn't know what to say. He just sat there beside her, watching the stars, feeling the warmth of her presence next to him. For the first time since she had arrived, the silence between them felt comfortable, and Danny began to wonder if maybe this strange alien princess understood him better than anyone ever had. The attack came without warning. Danny was eating breakfast in the mess hall when the ship shook like a giant hand that grabbed it and squeezed. Alarms blared. Lights flickered. The artificial gravity stuttered, and for a terrifying moment, everything floated before crashing back down. He ran to the bridge, pushing through crowds of panicked crew members. Alindra appeared beside him, her face pale but determined. Whatever was happening, she intended to face it, and his side. Captain Santos was already at the command center, shouting orders. The main view screen showed 5 ships emerging from hyperspace, surrounding the Starboard Hope like wolves circling a wounded deer. Korath Raiders, Santos said grimly. The same faction that destroyed the princess's transport. Danny felt his blood go cold. The Korath were the most vicious pirates in the sector, known for their brutality and their complete lack of mercy. They attacked without warning and left no survivors. They must have been tracking me, Alindra whispered. They came to finish what they started. The first volley hit the Starboard Hope before anyone could react. The ship screamed as weapons fire tore through its hull. On the view screen, Danny watched one of the cargo bays explode outward, spilling debris and bodies into space. Return fire, Santos ordered, but the Starboard Hope was a rescue vessel, not a warship. Its weapons were meant for clearing debris, not fighting battleships. The shots splashed harmlessly against the Korath shields. We can't win this fight, Danny said, his mind racing. We need to run. They're blocking our hyperspace routes, the navigation officer reported. We can't jump without flying through their formation. The Korath continued their assault. Another section of the ship buckled. More crew members died. Danny watched Lisa Perry on an internal camera, dragging wounded sailors toward the medical bay while explosions rocked the corridor around her. Something changed inside him then. A cold, clear certainty that settled into his bones like ice. I need a shuttle, he said. Captain Santos turned to stare at him. What? Give me a shuttle. I can draw them away. Make them chase me while you find a gap in their formation and jump. That's suicide, Lieutenant. Probably. Danny's voice was steady. But if I don't do something, we all die. This way, at least the ship has a chance. Alindra grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his flesh. Danny, no. You cannot do this. It was the first time she had called him by his first name. The sound of it in her musical voice made his heart ache. I have to, he said. They want you, Alindra. As long as you're on this ship, they'll keep attacking. But if they think you're on my shuttle, then they will kill you instead. Her silver eyes were wet with tears. This is not what I wanted. I never wanted you to die for me. Danny reached out and touched her face. Her skin was cool and smooth beneath his fingers. "I'm not doing this because of your life, Dad. I'm doing this because you matter. Because the universe is better with you in it. And if I have to die to keep you safe, then that's a trade I'm willing to make." He pulled away before she could respond and ran for the shuttle bay. The shuttle was small and fast, built for quick rescue operations. Danny powered it up and launched into the void, directly toward the Korath formation. He activated the communication system and broadcast on all frequencies. "Attention, Korath vessels. The Thyrian princess is aboard my shuttle. If you want her, come and get her." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, all 5 Korath ships turned toward him, their weapons charging. "Santas now!" Danny shouted into his communicator. "Go!" Behind him, the Starbound Hope lurched into motion, racing toward the gap in the Korath formation that Danny had created. The raiders hesitated, torn between pursuing their main target and chasing the fleeing rescue ship. That hesitation gave Danny his chance. He pushed the shuttle into a dive, spinning between 2 Korath ships so close that he could see the individual weapon ports on their hulls. Plasma fire streaked past him, close enough to light up his cockpit. He rolled, climbed, dove again, dancing through death like it was a game he had played 1,000 times before. The Korath committed to the chase. They wanted the princess, and they believed she was on Danny's shuttle. All 5 ships abandoned their pursuit of the Starbound Hope and focused their fury on Danny. On his scanner, he watched the Starbound Hope reach safe distance and disappear into hyperspace. "Thank God," he breathed. Then a plasma bolt hit his engine, and the shuttle began to spin. Danny fought the controls, but it was hopeless. More shots hit him, tearing through his small craft like paper. Systems failed. Fire erupted in the cockpit. Through the shattered viewport, he could see a small moon growing larger and larger. He was going to crash. He was going to die, but the ship was safe. Alindra was safe. And somehow, that made everything okay. The moon rushed up to meet him. And then there was only darkness. Far above. In the emptiness of space, a single escape pod fell toward the moon's surface, following the trail of wreckage that Danny's shuttle had left behind. Inside the pod, Alindra whispered a prayer to gods she barely believed, in and prepared to find the human who had saved her life twice. She would not let him die alone, even if it meant dying beside him, because somewhere, in the past few weeks, between the conversations and the silences and the warmth of his presence, Alindra had realized something that terrified her. She had fallen in love with him and Thyrians. For all their long lives and ancient wisdom, loved only once. The pod entered the atmosphere, flames licking at its hull, and Alindra braced herself for impact. Whatever happened next, she would face it at Danny's side, just as she had promised. Alindra found Danny in the wreckage of his shuttle, buried under twisted metal and broken glass. He was alive, but barely. Blood covered his face, and his breathing was shallow and weak. His left arm bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. The moon around him was harsh and unforgiving. The sky was gray and heavy with toxic clouds. The ground was covered in sharp rocks and fine dust that stung her eyes. Without proper equipment, they would both be dead within 2 days. But Alindra pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task in front of her. She dragged Danny from the wreckage, her muscles screaming with effort. He was heavier than he looked, solid with human muscle and bone. She laid him on a flat piece of hull plating and examined his injuries. They were bad, very bad, broken bones, internal bleeding, wounds that she had no equipment to treat. But Alindra was not helpless. She was a daughter of the Imperial House, trained in the old ways that most Thyrians had forgotten. She placed her hands on Danny's chest and closed her eyes. reaching deep within herself for the light that lived in her core. The healing art was dangerous. It worked by transferring life energy from one being to another, and using it too much could kill the healer as surely as any wound. But Alindra did not hesitate. She poured her strength into Danny, feeling her own heartbeat slow as his grew stronger. When she finally stopped, she was so weak she could barely stand. But Danny's breathing was deeper now, steadier. His wounds had begun to close. He would live, at least for a while longer. She built a shelter from shuttle debris, dragging pieces of metal into a rough structure that blocked the worst of the toxic wind. She rationed their water and the small amount of air they had in emergency tanks. She calculated how long they could survive and came up with a number that made her want to cry. 40-8 hours. Maybe less. Danny woke up on the second day. His eyes opened slowly, confused and unfocused, and then he saw Alindra sitting beside him, and everything came rushing back. "What?" His voice was rough and dry. "Where are we?" "A moon near where the Karath attacked us," Alindra said. "Your shuttle crashed. I followed you down." Danny tried to sit up and groaned with pain. His injuries were healing, but they were far from healed. "You followed me? Why?" "The whole point was to keep you safe." "The whole point," Alindra replied calmly, "was to repay my life debt." "How can I do that if you are dead?" "That's insane." Danny's face twisted with frustration and anger. "You were supposed to escape. You were supposed to live. I gave my life so you could get away, and you threw it all away by following me into a crash. I did not throw anything away." Alandra's voice was quiet but firm. "I made a choice. The same kind of choice you make every day without even thinking about it." Danny stared at her, breathing hard. "I don't understand you. I don't understand any of this." Alindra moved closer to him, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his human body. "Then let me explain." She took his hand in hers. His skin was rough and warm, so different from Therian hands. "Among my people, we believe that when someone saves your life, your souls become connected. Wherever you go, part of me goes with you. Whatever you feel, part of me feels." She paused. "When you flew toward those ships, I felt your fear. But more than that, I felt your conviction. You believe my life was worth more than yours." "It is," Danny said without hesitation. "You're a princess. You're important. You can change the galaxy. I'm just a pilot." "No." Alindra shook her head. "You are not just anything. You are Danny Cole, the man who flew into a debris field to save a stranger. The man who sat with me for 16 hours, talking about stars and mothers and home. The man who made me laugh for the first time in decades." Her silver eyes met his. "No one in my life has ever seen me the way you do. To my family, I am a political tool. To my people, I am a symbol. But to you, I am just Alindra. Just a person worth saving." Danny was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "I've always thought of myself as ordinary. Just a guy doing his job. Nothing special." "That is what makes you extraordinary," Alindra said. "You do not see the fire that burns inside you. But I do. I have seen it since the first moment I opened my eyes and found you watching over me." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. A Therian gesture of deep affection and trust. "I love you, Danny Cole, not because of life debts or ancient laws. I love you because you showed me what it means to burn brightly in a universe that is cold and dark." Danny closed his eyes. He could feel her breath on his face, cool and sweet. "I don't know what love means to your people. I don't know what I can offer you. I'm going to grow old and die while you're still young. I'm going to slow down while you stay the same." "I know," Alindra whispered. "And I do not care. I would rather have a single lifetime with you then an eternity without. They stayed like that for a long time, foreheads touching, breathing together in the dim light of their makeshift shelter. Outside, the toxic winds howled. Their supplies dwindled. Death crept closer with every passing hour. And inside the shelter, two beings from different worlds held on to each other and refused to let go. On the third day, when their air was almost gone and hope had nearly died, a fleet of Thyrian warships appeared in the sky. The Emperor himself had come, bringing enough firepower to destroy the Korath forever. And when the rescue team found Danny and Alindra, they found them together, hands intertwined, still fighting to survive, still refusing to give up, because that was what humans did, and Alindra had learned that lesson well. The Imperial Palace of Thyra was the most beautiful building Danny had ever seen. It rose from the purple forest like a dream made solid, all sweeping towers and glowing walls that caught the light of 3 moons. Inside, every surface was carved with history, every hallway filled with treasures older than human civilization. And Danny Cole, a search and rescue pilot from a small town on Earth, stood in the middle of it wearing the ceremonial armor of a princess's sworn guardian. 6 months had passed since the rescue on the moon. 6 months of arguments and negotiations, of cultural lessons and diplomatic meetings. The Emperor had not wanted a human in his palace. Half the court still looked at Danny like he was a stray animal that had wandered in from the wild. But Alindra had made her position clear. Where Danny went, she went. And where she stayed, he stayed. The Emperor, for all his power, could not fight against his daughter's heart. So Danny had become something new. Not quite human anymore, but not Thyrian either. He was a bridge between 2 worlds, a symbol of what could be built when different peoples chose understanding over fear. The common Thyrians loved him. Stories of his bravery had spread across the empire, growing larger with each telling. They said he had flown through 100 warships to save the princess. They said he had fought Korath warriors with his bare hands. They said his soul burned so bright that even the old gods took notice. Most of it was nonsense, of course. But Danny had learned that sometimes nonsense became truth if enough people believed in it. He walked through the imperial gardens, letting his feet carry him along familiar paths. The plants here were strange and beautiful, flowers that glowed in the dark, and trees that sang in the wind. Everything about this world was alien and wonderful. And yet, sometimes, Danny missed home. He missed the taste of real coffee instead of the Thyrian version. He missed watching football on lazy Sundays. He missed the feel of Earth rain on his face and the sound of English spoken without musical Thyrian accents. But then he would see Alindra, and all those feelings would fade like morning mist. She found him in the garden now, appearing beside him like she always did, like they were connected by an invisible thread that pulled them together. "You are thinking again," she said. "I can see it in your eyes." Danny smiled. "Is that a crime here? Thinking too much is considered unhealthy among my people. We prefer meditation and acceptance." She tilted her head. "But you humans never stop thinking, do you? Always planning, always worrying, always reaching for something new." "I guess not." Danny looked up at the unfamiliar stars. Old habits die hard. Alindra moved closer to him, her hand finding his. Her skin had become warm over the months, adapting to his touch. Or maybe he had just gotten used to her coolness. Either way, her hand in his felt like the most natural thing in the universe. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Coming here? Leaving everything behind?" Danny considered the question carefully. He thought about his friends on the Starward Hope, now stationed in Thyrian space as part of the new alliance between humans and the Empire. He thought about his small apartment on Earth, probably rented to someone else by now. He thought about the life he had imagined for himself, the quiet career and eventual retirement that had seemed like his only future. "No," he said finally. I don't regret it. Even though you will grow old while I remain young? Even though you will die while I continue living? Even then, Danny squeezed her hand. I used to think that the length of a life was what mattered. More years meant more value. But since coming here, I've learned something different. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. It's not about how long you live. It's about what you do with the time you have. It's about the connections you make, the love you share, the difference you leave behind. He smiled. I could live 1,000 years alone and never feel as alive as I do in a single moment with you. Alindra's silver eyes glistened. Among Therians, tears were rare and precious, saved only for the deepest emotions. Danny had seen her cry twice before, both times because of him. My people have lived so long that we forgot what it means to truly live, she said. We became cautious and careful, afraid of change, afraid of loss. We stopped burning. She pressed her forehead to his, that gesture of love and trust that had become their own. But you burn bright enough for both of us. Danny Cole, you remind me every day what it means to be alive. They stood there together as the 3 moons rose higher in the sky. Around them, the garden sang its soft songs. Below them, the city of the Therian Empire glittered with ancient light. Somewhere out there, human ships were crossing into Therian space for the first time in history. Trade agreements were being signed. Cultural exchanges were beginning. 2 species that had regarded each other with suspicion were learning to work together. And it had all started because one ordinary human had flown into a debris field to save a stranger. I love you, Danny said. The words came easily now, after months of practice. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how much time we have. But whatever comes, I want to face it with you. Alindra smiled, and in her smile Danny saw everything he had ever wanted. Then we will face it together, she said. For as long as the stars continue to shine. For as long as your bright heart continues to burn. She kissed him then, soft and sweet. While the moons watched, and the flowers glowed, and the universe turned on. Indifferent to the small miracle happening in the garden below. A human and a Therian, bound together by love and choice and the stubborn refusal to accept that some gaps cannot be bridged, because humans had always been good at building bridges. And this one, Danny thought as he held Alindra close, was the best thing he had ever built. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance. And somewhere in the vastness of space, new stories were beginning. But this story, the story of a pilot and a princess, of a rescue and a debt that became something more, had found its ending, not with tragedy or separation, but with 2 souls standing together in a garden of alien wonders, ready to face whatever came next. Together, as it was always meant to be.